Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Vincent Price.
If I am feeling particularly ambitious, I make a real curry, plus all the side dishes. Many curries are made with meats on the bone, but for my guests, I only want to serve small boys. I like to look around for some really exotic and very hot ones. That's the way my wife likes them. I then skin the boys and take all of the meat from the bone. The easy way is to stab them one at a time with a fork and heat them over a gas flame on the stove until the skin bursts. It then peels right off. What fun. To make the curry itself is child's play. A very simple but a very elegant dish. Nothing makes a more exotic party. I generally lower all the lights and burn a little child to help create a mood. And then I have sitar records and put them on the stereo, and that helps tremendously. Candles winking everywhere are very romantic. The visual display of the curry, all the condiments, and the boys is really spectacular. This meal depends on you to create a mood, so be daring. Use a different tablecloth or a brilliant remnant of material. Pull out all the brass and copper you can find. Wear dangling earrings and a draped sari if you have it, and every bracelet you can find. Your guests will talk about this dinner party for weeks.
Hello there, everyone. You're listening to the sultry sounds of the Sinister Spotlight podcast. As you know, I am Jose, and for today's episode, we actually have something kind of special going on because as opposed to the format that you've been seeing in previous episodes where I've invited guests to talk about particular films for the podcast, we are actually implementing a kind of new standard with this episode because I am hereby introducing our new permanent co-host, Eric Houge, who is the writer, the sometimes writer, behind the In the Garden of the Death Orchids blog. Eric and I have been talking for some time and collaborating on some projects, and we kind of sort of mutually decided that it may be cool to try out a co-hosting dynamic duo type approach to the whole podcasting thing. So from this episode henceforth, Eric will be a constant fixture of the podcast, and we'll be discussing some things kind of in the outer regions of film. We'll be getting into some interesting territory, I think, and I hope and think that you'll enjoy most of it. So, Eric, welcome to the show, and we're very, very glad to have you on board.
Thank you for having me, Jose.
Yeah, it's no problem whatsoever. As I said, Eric and I have kind of been secretly reading each other's stuff ever since I started blogging anyway. I think he started a little bit before me. So we kind of, at some point in time, just got in tune to each other's tastes, which we found out were very, very similar, and our sense of wit, if you can even call it that, and just our general writing style was very similar. So this joint venture of ours should prove very interesting and hopefully not too annoying for most people. But today, for our inaugural co-host episode of Sinister Spotlight, we are going to be tackling the theme of horror comfort food. Basically, we'll be discussing movies, mostly movies really, that give us a warm, fuzzy feeling, and what type of elements are at work in those movies, and why they make us feel, and maybe other horror fans in general, feel just very cozy when watching them. So, Eric, being that you kind of more or less picked this topic for us, in your own words, I mean, what do you think what constitutes horror comfort food in your eyes? What makes it so special and warm and fuzzy?
I don't know. I think when you brought up the topic, it just occurred to me that a horror comfort food would be or any type of comfort food would just be like something you would watch when you're homesick. That's like the quintessence. Or if you had a stressful day at work, or if you're having some relationship issues, it's just like an old friend that you throw in the DVD player. Something that feels warm and comfortable and very lived in, I think. So I think, sorry, you keep breathing as if you're going to speak.
Oh, sorry, I have a habit of doing that. It's from all the prank
I
calls
just
that
feel
I
like
did as
I'm
a
like
kid.
preemptively interrupting you.
Oh, well, that's just your style, so it's...
That's true. Well, you kind of have to barrel roll over your um, eloquence.
Oh, yeah, well, it's got to be pushed aside every now and then. I can't take up all the limelight. But no, I think your definition of comfort food is very apt, and it's a good one. Pretty much that's how I would have summed it up myself. I particularly like how you called it lived in, because I think with horror comfort food, like as you said, it's something that we can return to time and time again, so that when we do watch it, that particular film or films, they almost kind of feel like they have a little imprint of ourselves left on them, or vice versa, life imitating art, or what have you.
Yeah, and I think that's why nostalgia plays such a large role.
Yeah,
Because when you get into it early, it leaves that much more of an impact. When your brain is smaller and it has less room to hold certain things, it just gets a bigger piece of your personality, I guess. And there's like a weird kind of exchange that goes on between you and the movie. Or do you have any, out of curiosity, that are not movies? Since you said
that's a good question. Like things outside of movies that I would say would be comfort food to me. I suppose so. I would say that there are probably certain stories that I could read time and time again, that whether it's for, just kind of the flow of the narrative, or the pace, or the language, particularly. Usually, when it comes to fiction and things like that, language is pretty much a big thing, where I can hear, in my head, I can hear those phrases be repeated again and again, and I never get sick of them. For instance, usually, and this is something that I think we'll touch on later, because it's something I wanted to bring up. Usually, when it comes to both the type of films and fiction and whatever, what have you, that I like in horror, that kind of constantly stays with me, usually they deal with very basic stories, very kind of concise, almost. I won't call them stereotypical, because usually they in them of themselves, they're usually the ones that kind of kick-started the idea. Let me put it this way: a I would say that a horror comfort food story that I would pick would probably be The Monkey's Paw by W. Jacobs, just because it's it's just a tightly knit package. Like, it takes you from one scene to the next, and I won't say that the language itself is the main draw for that one. It's just the fact that it's a really, like I said, tightly woven story that just takes you from one scene to the next, and it just keeps on mounting with the tension and the anticipation. So that's the type of thing that I guess I appeals to me in both the movies I watch and the stories I read in the horror genre. What say you?
Oh, yeah, I would say that in terms of books, I tend to respond more to nonfiction as comfort food, I think.
Really? That's
Maybe
interesting.
because, yeah, I think more like biographies, like, probably the book that I've read the most times in my life is If Chins Could Kill by Bruce Campbell, because it's such a, like, it's like a discussion almost, or a one-sided discussion anyway.
Right.
Like, it's almost like Bruce Campbell is just sitting right next to you, telling you anecdotes and stories about his life.
I imagine it's by a fire, and he's stroking like a Persian cat while he's in a smoking jacket.
That's pretty much the cover to his second book, actually.
Well, hey, there you go.
Yeah. So I think that idea of, like I said earlier, like an old friend, it makes you feel you have that more personal connection, and it's also very light. It's without stakes. There's not huge consequences. It's just sort of like a friend in book form.
Yeah, no, I agree, exactly with what you just said, too, that there are no stakes, because the point that I was trying to allude to with what I was just saying is that usually I would suspect, just from my own experience and from what you described, that it's the same way with horror fans in general, where usually the type of movies that serve, and really it could go for any type of fandom, honestly, usually the type of media to use a big umbrella term, that serves as their comfort food, usually it's something that doesn't challenge them. And I don't mean to say that the movies are simple or stupid, or the books are simple and stupid, but like you said, there's nothing at stake. It's not going to shake their foundations. Like, I'd find it very hard to believe, personally, that somebody could call a movie like Martyrs comfort food.
I was just thinking Martyrs.
See, yeah, there you go. There you go. See, this is why you're the co-host.
Yeah.
But usually it's stuff like that. Stuff that maybe not even as intentionally tries to stir your ideals and morals like Martyrs did. Maybe something not as forward in its intentions as that.
Yeah. Let me throw a title out there.
Yeah, go ahead, please, because I'm losing.
Probably the most recognized or the most consumed horror comfort food, I think, would be something like the Friday the 13th franchise.
Yeah. I was thinking they're not exactly for me, but I am just not to make this all about me, but
It's your podcast.
I was just gonna say it's my podcast though. Weird. I have never been the biggest fan of slashers in general, usually from the 80s. Right, exactly. I just I've never really seen what the big deal was for them, even though I watched the whole Friday the 13th series when I was in middle school, I guess just to kind of see what all the fuss was about. And I enjoyed them, but like I said, even though I've never fully been crazy about them, I have always been very, very sympathetic to the attachment that people have to those movies. Like, I get it. I get why people are so comfortable with those movies. Probably in part, if not completely, because of the formula at work, I think.
Exactly. You go into it knowing exactly what you're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
There's no weight to any of it. It's all complete fluff. You have this character that people have grown attached to, even though he is a psychotic murderer. People have, or Freddy would be another example where people were dressing their kids in Freddy pajamas,
Yeah.
Like, they do, after a certain point, if a horror figure sticks around long enough, it starts to become very cuddly and very kind of a plush toy.
Right, exactly. It reminds me of that scene from, and it was brilliant how they, actually incorporated this in Wes Craven's New Nightmare. That scene when Heather Langenkamp is on the talk show and all the kids are in the Freddy masks and costumes. Right. That's just, it basically, it aligns essentially with what you're saying, that it gets to the point that most of the harm is taken out of the character, but there's still a sense of companionship with, even somebody who is a child murderer, basically. Go figure.
Child molester, no less.
Yeah, did they ever, just kind of on a side note, did they ever address that in any of the original Nightmare movies? I know they did in the remake, and yes, I did see it in the theater. I apologize. But I'm not sure if they ever... I
remember you posted a video review for that.
Oh, God, I can't believe you remember that.
From Beyond Depraved Days.
Yeah, in the From Beyond Depraved Days, I even sang some Donna Summer in it. That was interesting.
I must have blocked that part out.
Yeah, thank God. That was
But no, I think it was all subtext in the original franchise. But I mean, why else would someone kill children?
Other than to, molest them at some point. Fair enough.
But, going back to what you're talking about the idea of these anti-heroes, villains, but really they're anti-heroes, becoming companions, you could also apply that, I think, to the Universal series, the old classics like The Wolfman and Frankenstein. And those make a bit more sense because they were all misunderstood. That's what set the Universal horror movies apart from, say, Paramount or MGM horror movies.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, is that you have these characters who they kind of have this self-loathing. They don't want to be monsters, but they are anyway. Except for Dracula. He seems to love it, I think.
Well, see, I was thinking that too, but there's still a little, just to kind of talk about that movie very quickly, just in the scene, like the opera house scene, that one quote he has kind of gives you a clue that he might not, be a big supporter of the whole vampirism thing when he says, to die, to be really dead, that must be glorious. He says it very morbidly and very zestfully, but, it could be, seen as him feeling a little bit of, sadness about his undead predicament.
Yeah, and there are worse things than death,
Yeah,
etc.
exactly. That's
That's
great,
true.
great lines.
But I think he does seem to have those moments of morbidity. But like, I think the scene where Harker is that character Harker? I haven't seen that movie in so
Yeah,
long.
Jonathan Harker. That's yeah.
Renfield.
Oh, Renfield. Yeah,
Oh,
that's
sorry,
Dwight Fry.
Dwight Fry.
No, it's easy to mix them up.
Well, it changes from movie to movie which character.
Exactly. Yeah, that's why you get a safe pass.
But when he visits Dracula, it seems almost like Dracula is kind of toying with him, and like he's so gleefully bizarre, and he's like smiling about everything, and he's so over the top with his delivery that you think, was this just it was either Bela Lugosi was completely unaware that this could seem kind of silly, or it's the character of Dracula just being like, I'm gonna mess with this guy just because I can.
Yeah, why the hell not? I mean, yeah, he didn't even really do that in the original book by Stoker. At least never really seemed to be alluded to as specifically as the scene where you see Dracula outside of Renfield's cell, just standing there, with his big luminous eyes, and Renfield's basically having a one-sided conversation with himself about, oh no, nothing, not that, master, anything but that. So yeah, he definitely he's kind of like Freddy in the sense that he definitely has fun with what he's doing, or he has at least a sense of whimsy about him that he likes to fuck with his servants.
Right. And another villain who has a lot of fun is the Invisible Man.
Oh yes, we were just discussing good
He's
old Claude
gleefully
Rains.
insane.
Oh, he is very gleefully insane. I know we're diverting a little bit from the comfort food thing, but we're really not. Just to clarify, because
yeah, that's what makes these characters someone you want to return to again, is the fact that they are fun to be around, they're fun to watch, even as they're murdering people.
Exactly, and that's why, for me anyway, the Universal horror films are a big source of comfort food viewing for me, just because, as we addressed earlier, those were the ones that I grew up with. Those were the first horror movies that I saw. Some people may know this already, but I actually, and I told you this the other night, my very, very first Universal horror film and official horror film watching was The Phantom of the Opera, but it's the one with Claude Rains, the one from 1943, which, like I said to Eric the other night, it's kind of a weird first horror film to watch, particularly in regards to the Universal horror lexicon. But as Eric pointed out, it could have been something more obscure, like Captain Wild Woman, or like The Brute Man or something. So got to count your losses. But getting back to Mr. Claude Rains, yeah, he is. I love The Invisible Man so much, and it's one that I described earlier to Eric. It's probably one of the Universal horror movies, besides the three big kahunas, Dracula, Frankenstein, and the Wolfman, that I love returning to the most. Again, because we get back to, for me anyway, The Invisible Man is, I know I'm probably going to say this 10 more times in the podcast, but it's a tightly woven package. I feel like it just has really sharp direction. Everything is crisp and clear about that production, just from the characters to the action, minus a few parts here and there. I could have done a little bit without Kemp, I think, is the other scientist's name. I could have done a little bit without his whining, and maybe some.
Yeah, but you get to see him thrown off a cliff.
Yeah, so it's all worth it in the end. A little bugger.
Satisfying at least.
Exactly. But Invisible Man is definitely one of the ones that I love to revisit the most. Getting back to one of the reasons being is that Claude Rains just plays the part of Griffin, the mad scientist, just perfectly. Right down from his cackle, which is, seriously, you can't listen to that cackle and not start smiling yourself. I defy you. It's just,
right.
Contagious. It's contagious, and once he starts, once he gets in those pair of pants and starts hopping down the path there, singing "Here We Go Gathering Nuts in May," it's all over. It's just hilarious. But are you? Well, I know you're a fan, obviously, but would you say that the Universal horror films would be comfort food for yourself? Anyone's in particular?
I think I would. I didn't necessarily grow up with the Universal horror movies
Right.
because I saw an episode of Full House. They had an episode where Stephanie got scared by the Wolfman.
Oh,
They
that's
showed,
right.
like a 5-second clip from the Wolfman, and I in turn got scared. So I think I put off watching those for several years.
That's too funny. I remember that episode.
Right? And Uncle Joey's solution did not work for me, by the way.
Oh, cutting it out, yeah.
Right? Yeah. But over the years, I would say, and this is atypical from what I was talking about earlier, which was nostalgia playing a big part. Although maybe it isn't, because when I was a kid, there was a series of books at the local library. I don't remember what they were called, but have you ever heard of The Angry Video Game Nerd?
Yes.
He has a video on his site. He does a bunch of Halloween stuff every year in October.
Yeah.
He did a video about these books. They had orange covers, and some of them had purple covers, but we had the ones that had orange covers.
Oh, the Crestwoods, right?
Is that what they are? It could be.
Are those the ones that talk about the classic monsters? They have the black and white covers.
Yeah, they just basically recap the different franchises.
Yeah.
They have pictures in them.
Yeah. That's right. I have fond memory of the Crestwoods. I don't mean to interrupt your story, but no, I found those in third grade, up in Arizona in our school library. It pretty much happened right around the same time that I started watching the movies, so it was pretty much in sync with my viewing. So yeah, I remember the Crestwoods. Those are awesome books.
Yeah, so I think that fed my horror need at that time without me actually watching the movies, which I was afraid of.
Yeah. Well, yeah, fair enough. No, they were good books for that type of a resource.
Yeah, and then I always collected things that were related to the Universal monster movies.
Yeah.
Like the old toys that they had at Burger King.
I don't remember those ones.
It was like probably around the late 90s.
Yeah, like
I don't
when they
remember what the occasion was. Maybe they were being re-released on VHS or something.
That might have been around the time that they put them on the stamps, the Universal horror monsters.
Right, and I had a bunch of posters of those stamps hanging up on my wall. I still do, actually.
Oh, jealous.
Of the Mummy, Phantom of the Opera, the Lon Chaney, not Claude Rains.
Right, yeah, obviously.
And the Wolfman, Frankenstein, Dracula.
Yeah, that's right, that's right.
Yeah, so I was always into at least the idea of the Universal movies. And not only the Universal movies, but just horror movies in general from the 30s and 40s. The Val Lewton movies. I love old silent horror films. And then I think even more than the actual classics, I mean, I love the classics, and they're the best films, definitely, but I like the lesser-known films are more comfort foodie for me. The sequels and like The Black Cat or The Raven is one of my favorites with Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi. Yeah,
I remember you posted that in like your top 20 Halloween countdown from however many years ago, and I was very surprised to have seen that movie crop up. Usually you don't in a lot of people's like favorites from the Universal years.
Yeah, and then The Vampire Bat with Lionel Atwill.
Oh, really? Yeah.
The original... Is it Mystery of the Wax Museum? Is that the original one?
Yeah, that's the one from 33. Yeah, that's the one with Fay Wray.
Yeah, and has that great 30s two-strip Technicolor.
Oh yeah, of course, and it has
the Spunky Reporter. You can definitely tell that's a Warner Brothers because it has the spunky, nosy reporter.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it has one of our
into scrapes.
Yep, it has one of our favorite elements, the snappy journalists and reporters.
Yeah, walking straight out of like a Humphrey Bogart film.
Exactly, because that's how everybody in the 30s talked.
As we was previously established.
Exactly.
In our personal lives, not on the podcast.
Now it is. Yeah, that's fairly interesting that you for you, your comfort food is a little more obscure than me anyway, as far as the classic horror films are concerned. Well, why is there a particular reason for that you tend towards the slightly less known sequels and like Warner Brother movies that you mentioned?
I don't know. It might just be the fact that they are
not Universal.
No, I love even the Universal lesser known ones. I just can't think of any off the top of my head. Because I'm not particularly sure what studio put out what movie at the time.
Right.
But I think it's just that they're breezier. They don't have a feel of importance.
Mm.
They were made by people who I think were more interested in just the bottom dollar and just throwing a film together, as opposed to people who were maybe trying to create serious art. Not that there's anything wrong with serious art, but that's not necessarily what you turn to when you just want a bit of an uplift to your mood. You know what I mean?
No, I would agree with that. And, it is safe to say not to, say that the adverse of, trying to make art is the bad thing either. Obviously, that's what studios are made for. But yeah, I would say that, the other studios were obviously trying to cash in at least a little bit on Universal's success. And I think it was funny. I thought what you were going to go with your reasoning behind your, not preference, but your admiration for like the Warner Brothers movies and whatnot, is that they don't have that they don't have that far away quality to them. It's not in some abbey in Transylvania or the Black Hills of Germany. It's in New York City at the daily paper or what have you.
Yeah, that's
most of the time.
That could also play a role.
Yeah, it's
I
possible.
haven't given that a lot of thought.
Well, you should, because everything that I have to say is extremely profound.
Well,
much like Universal.
Yes.
But I only
That's why
care.
you're so boring to listen to.
Exactly. This is what we've established. I'm glad that we're on the same page here. But something that you did mention to me in our brief discussions of just horror comfort food is that you said that the slashers from the 1990s provided a lot of horror comfort food for you.
Right.
Yeah, would you like to
Not
explore
a
that?
fan of the 80s, but I love the slasher movies of the 90s.
Which is very interesting because, the 90s get ragged on a lot, and, rightfully so. There wasn't too many...
I'm not saying they're good.
Yeah.
I'm just saying I enjoy them.
Exactly. Well, what, for example, and why, maybe?
Well, I grew up in the 90s.
Fair enough.
The first movie I ever watched, the first horror movie I ever watched on my own was Urban Legend.
Oh, okay.
Because my sister had a collection of VHSs of, like, I Know What You Did Last Summer, Scream sequels, Halloween H2O, and then she had Urban Legend in there. And I watched most of Scream 2 from behind the couch while I was at a sleepover. So I always had this fascination with horror, but up until I was probably about 11 or 12, I was too scared to actually watch any of the movies. But Horror Legend was the first one. I mean, Urban Legend was the first one that I actually sat down and watched on my own all the way through. So I think that movie, as silly and incredibly gimmicky and post-modernism douchebaggery as it is, it's really fun.
Yeah, it is. I have fairly fond memories of watching Urban Legend myself. I think they used to show it on USA a lot.
Probably.
Yeah, back in the day. But no, I always thought it was kind of an interesting film, and I know you probably know this due to the things that we've talked about in conversation before, but just for the listeners to kind of have an idea, I've always liked the idea of when killers, just to use a broad term, when killers have a particular MO, and I've always loved it when they draw that MO from stories. It's always kind of fascinated me. So I guess in a sense you could say that's one particular theme that serves as comfort food for me. I don't remember the specific plot details or really much of the movie, honestly, but I think The Bone Collector with Denzel Washington kind of followed a similar idea.
I never saw that one. I read the book.
What's that?
I read the book.
Oh, it was based on a book. What do you know?
It was, yeah. It was, a pretty typical thriller.
Right. But yeah, I just always been fascinated with the idea of, like these homicidal maniacs mirroring their crimes after, after works of art or stories or what have you. And I know that...
although the killer in Urban Legend, really her kills, well, spoiler, her...
Yeah. Whoops.
Are very dependent on coincidence, and she does cheat quite a bit.
Yeah, that's very true.
Like, there's a scene where the guy is obviously so painfully inspired by Scream because the guy's talking to the killer on the phone. And he's going, what urban legend is this supposed to, because he knows he's talking to the killer, what urban legend is this supposed to be? The one with the babysitter and the blah, blah, blah?
Yeah.
And go check on the kids. And then they're like, then the killer says, no, this is the one about the dog in the microwave.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
The dog in the microwave explodes. And then his death has nothing to do with urban legends because she just puts a beer bong in his mouth and pours, like, Drano down his throat or something.
It could.
So it's like, you use that as this, I don't know. It's like, it's just semantics, but I'm taking this killer to task for not sticking strictly to her MO.
Yeah, you should, as you should, she established something and she went back on her word, so not cool, killer from Urban Legend. You should be ashamed of yourself.
Right, and also the kill at the beginning, the axe murder, someone's in the back seat.
Yeah.
How did she know that the guy was going to be like, there's someone in the back? Like, she didn't know it was going to play out like that.
Exactly, and how did she know it was going to be Brad Dourif of all people? I mean, come on.
Yeah, with the stutter and looking all creepy.
Yeah, I mean, that was just perfect.
If he'd just been a little cleaner, her whole plan would have been thwarted.
Or, not have the stutter, at least. Jeez.
Yeah.
But yeah, that really worked into her favor.
Yeah, he could have been a little more direct in his approach, too, though.
Yeah, he could have, offered her chocolates maybe at first or something. Be like, oh, I have something to tell you. There's a homicidal maniac in your back seat. But, these things happen.
Yeah, and then I think from there I went on to I Know What You Did Last Summer, and then The Scream, which, as I told you before, I contend that Scream is a genuinely brilliant movie. No guilty pleasure aspect of that at all for me.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily argue against that statement. I know there are probably a few people who would, but
yeah, lame wads.
I know, yeah, just ironic.
Screw all of you if you don't agree with me.
Exactly. That's what we're here for, just to postulate our theories and our ideas, and if nobody likes it, then stop listening. No, seriously, please don't stop listening, because I think there's only like 2 people out there, so we didn't mean it. Sorry.
Are they Scream fans?
What's that?
Are they Scream fans, those 2 people?
You know what? I've been stalking their profiles for some time now, and I haven't really been able to gather that much from them, so just give me a little more time, guys. I'm working on it.
Alright, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt.
Okay.
But anyway, yeah, we could talk about the brilliance of Scream on another episode.
Yes, that's that.
But that's a movie to me that combines the comfort food fun with genuine art, I think. Every so often you get a movie that just hits that perfect balance where it falls right in the middle.
Right, and I think that is as good a time as any to bring up an example that you shared with me previously in Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho.
Psycho, right?
Yeah.
Great movie.
Exactly, and it's one that there was a period of time that either it was on TV or for some reason it was on the TV, I know for some reason, on a fairly consistent loop. And it's just one of those movies that maybe not necessarily draws me to watch it every time it's on, but if it is on, yeah, I mean, I could just watch it back to back. It's just, I don't want to say it's a tightly woven package because I've already used my ticket with that, but no,
I don't know if packages are woven, by the way.
Your commentary isn't really necessary at this point. I would appreciate you not pointing out my stupidity to those 2 people who may still be listening. I don't know. They probably got scared away.
I just don't want you to get emails, after the fact.
Yeah. The 2 people who are listening to this, they're going to be extremely angry over the fact that I call packages woven.
They don't like their metaphors mixed, Jose.
They don't.
That's all I'm saying.
They're an unruly and particular lot, they are.
Yep, those 2.
Yeah, those guys.
What were we talking about? Oh, yeah, Psycho.
Yeah, Psycho, that's right.
Psycho, Jaws, and Die Hard are the 3 movies that I would just watch anytime they're on TV. Those are just the most watchable.
I didn't expect Die Hard to be the 3rd member of that trio, honestly.
Oh, man, I love Die Hard.
That's pretty funny, because I know you've mentioned to me before your, I guess I shouldn't say your thoughts on action cinema in general, but you've had unique experiences with action movies, and I guess I just wouldn't have suspected that Die Hard would have made the top three of your most rewatchable movies, comfort food wise.
What did I say about action movies?
Well, no, I just, in particular, I remember what you were telling me the other night about. Now, I know I'm probably going to commit a horrendous sin right now, so I just thought I'd acknowledge it beforehand. You were telling me about the time that you watched G.I. Joe, Rise of the Cobra. Before I go any further, I am not comparing Die Hard to G.I. Joe, Rise of the Cobra. I just want to make that perfectly clear. But
G.I. Joe did have a pretty cool opening sequence, though, I will admit.
okay, well, there's that at least. I haven't seen it, so I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, it takes place in ancient, I think it's Scotland. It doesn't really matter. It's just somewhere old.
Oh yeah, there we go.
There's these two warring clans, which I guess in the mythology of G.I. Joe go on to be the Cobra clan or something.
Okay.
But yeah, they bring in this guy who's like the enemy, and they basically heat up an iron mask and then like shove it on his face.
Oh.
As like eternal punishment, so he will always be marked, as the enemy of their clan or something. It's actually a pretty cool sequence.
That does sound pretty cool. It's almost kind of Black Sunday-esque.
Yeah, that's true. If the whole movie had been taking place in that time period, it would have been better, I think. Instead of, because then they couldn't have had Marlon Wayans.
Yeah, no black people in Scotland at that time. Maybe. Well, no. Anyway, getting back to Psycho, that one movie we were talking about. You also mentioned another one, Jaws, which is, from what I can ascertain, probably your favorite movie ever.
Oh yes, very much so.
Well, I'm sure you probably made it a point to give details and reasons behind that at other points, but for our purposes now, why would you say that Jaws is not only great quality, horror type comfort food for you, but probably your favorite movie ever?
Well, it's just eminently watchable, I would say. It's very funny. I always forget how funny that movie is, and then I watch it. It's like Pulp Fiction. It's funnier than most straight comedies, and yet there's moments of genuine pathos. There's creepy moments. There's suspense. There's adventure. It's a great character study. It's superbly directed by young Steven Spielberg. I think Alfred Hitchcock, to bring it back to Psycho, said that when he saw Jaws, he said that Spielberg was the first director of cinema who didn't see the proscenium, meaning that he was the first director who successfully got cinema away from its theatrical roots and just made a movie in its own terms and in its own medium, rather than drawing on, plays and such.
Okay, no,
that has nothing to do with anything, really.
No, I think it's a great point, actually, because, I think that's a very valid point. I enjoyed Jaws. It is, I agree with all the qualities that you stated. I particularly like the character study aspect of it. I think it has that, obviously, it has that whole gritty, great dilemma of man versus nature, like unstoppable natural force of nature. I mean, the idea behind the shark itself is pretty crazy, but stuff like that can happen from time to time. So, mentioning that quote about Hitchcock that you said, I think it's a very apt observation of the movie because there's just something about it that it seems kind of like a redundant thing to say maybe, but it is a very cinematic movie, like you said. It's or as Hitchcock said, I should say, that it's so grounded in the element of cinema that any allusions to the stage-bound nature that movies before might have had is completely lost.
Right. So we haven't talked much about your choices, though. Let's move on to you.
Sure, no, that's no problem, but, as the new co-host, I'd like to get a sense of who you are. I still don't trust you with,
Well, rightfully so.
most things, yeah. But, Yeah, the one of the other ones that comes to my mind as far as horror comfort food is concerned would probably be anthologies, which I've always been a sucker for since, I was fairly young. I really don't know how it happened. It just kind of was a natural progression, but I guess I've just always been. Let me put it this way: the things about like horror anthologies, both in film and in television and even in literature, that has always drawn me to them is the kind of going along the lines of the comfort food metaphor. I've always liked the buffet style of a horror anthology. You basically get a little taste of everything in
Right.
the 100 in the 90 minutes of a movie or in the half hour of a TV series. You're just always being presented with something new. That could speak to possibly my slight case of ADD, but no, I just always enjoy them. And kind of getting back to a point we made earlier with movies like Dr. Terror's House of Horrors from Amicus is a really good example for the fact that with those stories in particular, there is nothing. Uh, there's nothing at stake, to use your phrase, with those stories. Have you seen the movie?
I have not seen that one yet.
Okay, all right, yeah, it's basically just imagine any older horror anthology that you've seen, and that'll probably be Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, particularly if you've seen any of the Amicus movies, which on the whole are all pretty enjoyable. But the thing with Dr. Terror's House of Horrors that I have always found amusing, and it actually, as a child, when I saw this, it shaped my conception of what a horror anthology was supposed to be in every sense of the word. Basically, what it is, the first story, it seemed to me that the writers, came to the idea of, okay, we need to do a horror anthology for Amicus Studios. So one of them has to be a werewolf story. We got to have a vampire story. Here's a living plant story. Here's a reanimated hand story. That's basically the way that Dr. Terror's House of Horrors works. And there's just something so safe and, you know, reassuring about watching a movie like that, where, like you said before, you know what to expect. They just all fit very comfortably into their own little subgenres and niches. The vampire story and the werewolf story and the voodoo story is another one that they use. So when watching anthologies, I mean, you'll have the odd one every now and then, like usually more contemporary stuff like Three Extremes. Well, that's just Asian cinema in general, I guess. But Three Extremes, or something of that nature, where the uh, the genre boundaries are kind of bent, and what have you. But in the older anthologies, in particular, I mean, even in Dead of Night, the one from Ealing Studios, which I know you've seen, there's
Yeah.
just something comfortable about watching a movie like that, because you like, even in the sense of Dead of Night, you've heard those stories before, like the first one about the what is it, a hearse driver, the one that says room for one more. That story's been around forever. So is the Christmas ghost story with the hide and seek game, where it turns out the little boy is a ghost. You've heard these stories before in some form or fashion, but with anthologies, it's always cool to see how the writers and the directors kind of tweak them a little bit to fit their needs for their particular anthology.
Yeah. There's also something about the British accent, I think. I don't know. It just makes it feel more, more kind of jovial, I guess.
Yeah, I could see that. Particularly with that the golf segment from Dead of Night, probably.
Yeah. I know people always tend to skip that one, but I enjoyed that one quite a bit.
Yeah, it's not all that
I
bad. I
thought it
mean,
was fun.
yeah, it's kind of like Topper, basically.
But yeah, there is something about the British slang and their way with words and the way that they relate to one another that is very inviting, I think.
That's true. That's true, because you mentioned that, and just to kind of get away from anthologies a little bit, but that makes me think another movie that I could probably say is would probably be a fairly consistent source of comfort food for me would probably be I always call it Night of the Demon. by its original
Right.
name. Of course, it's known as Curse of the Demon over here in the States. I'm not sure if people still refer to it as that, but whatever. Night of the Demon, Curse of the Demon, the one from 1957 with Dana Andrews and Niall McGuinness, which I did a Sinister Spotlight with Jack Vesey. For those of you who listened to that back in December of 2011, that's a very inviting movie. And of course, I feel like it's very easy for me too to feel a sense of comfort when movies that are in black and white, because I guess that's just because, again, it has a nostalgic factor. Those are the types of movies I grew up with. So when I watch a black and white movie, for instance, it's easier for me to get in that comfort food frame of mind.
Right, and there's a timelessness to black and white that you don't really get in color.
True. That's very true.
If sometimes if you watch a movie that maybe is in an era that you don't care for, like say the 80s, you don't necessarily feel ties to it in the way that you feel to a black and white movie, which could take place at any time, really.
Exactly. Yeah, because it doesn't have that explicit use of color that might subconsciously determine, what time period it was set in, or, anything like that. But you're very right in, your assessment of the monochrome visuals.
Also Jacques. I don't know how do you say his name because I don't want to say it. The director.
I can't really do it that much.
Jacques Tourneur.
Jacques Tourneur. It's French.
Tourneur.
It doesn't matter. Turner. Jacques Tourneur. Yeah.
That movie, along with I think his Val Lewton movies.
Yeah.
He definitely has a sense of. I don't want to say a sense of fun because it's not like people are always like partying or something, but there is a definite sense of. I think people just back then people were better at balancing the tone of their movie. Nowadays, a movie either has to be like all dark or all light.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, they were much better at there were lighter moments, and there was some witty dialogue here, and then there was sort of a dark, spooky sequence over here, and they all twined together to feel very much like part of a cohesive world. And it makes it much easier to sort of get through it where you're not being bombasted with just either happiness or total bleak depression on every frame.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Yeah, no, that apt description, honestly. Because, I do get that feeling, too, that things aren't, here I go again, things aren't as tightly woven together as they used to be in some of the older films.
Yeah, and then I think he just always came up with these. He was very good about attention to detail, Tournier was.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that helps rewatchability as well, which maybe is a part of comfort food. I don't know. But the idea that you can watch something again and pick up on different things, different subtleties that you didn't necessarily notice the first time.
Yeah, that's always fun. That is, I usually get the chance. I mean, I'm at the point where I think I have a fairly good handle of it, but another more recent movie that is definitely comfort food for me for kind of different reasons than any of the ones I've pointed out so far would probably be The Ninth Gate.
Interesting.
Yeah, by Roman Polanski. Not a perfect film. I mean, to me it is. I love it. But I realize that, it's not everybody's cup of tea. But for me, it's probably superficial reasons that I love that movie as much as I do. But I think there are some little more profound touches to it that kind of draw me in. But for me, basically stated, I love that movie so much because for me, it's kind of like book porn. And, if you're a fan or aficionado of, the binding of a beok or, the shuffle of pages, then that movie is pretty much the cat's meow when it comes to that type of stuff. Because as I said in a review that I wrote for Classic Horror, it's almost kind of like a film noir. It just kind of runs headlong into a I don't want to say Lovecraftian type plot, but it kind of has touches of that because Johnny Depp is an antiquarian of sorts, where he kind of pillages through, not pillages, but he kind of, reads up on these these old volumes of texts, and he has this constant sense of foreboding and being watched after by, possibly Satan or at least maybe his followers. So, it kind of blends together a lot of elements that I like in movies because I'm a big fan of film noir, and I just I just like the whole aesthetic of the hard-bitten cynic investigator who's constantly smoking cigarettes, and the fact that he's looking through books, these ancient texts concerning, the Lord of Darkness, just kind of makes it really sing for me.
Right. I haven't seen that one.
You haven't? I'm surprised.
No, I don't really follow Roman Polanski's work all that much, except for the stuff that you have to see, like Chinatown. And I did enjoy Repulsion, actually.
Oh, really? I haven't seen Repulsion yet. I've seen Rosemary's Baby. I've seen Chinatown. I've actually have you seen, just out of curiosity, have you seen the Feelers Vampire Killers? Ugh.
No.
No? It's actually pretty. It's interesting. Because
Is it like a horror comedy?
Yes, I answered that question tentatively because it's kind of an interesting case where it's technically a horror comedy, but it's not necessarily that the comedy doesn't work. It's just, I don't know, it's a little hard to explain. I guess it really depends on the viewer for that particular movie. If, I wouldn't call it hysterical. It's definitely not a Mel Brooks, Young Frankenstein type of movie by far. It's basically, just think if like Hammer Studios started to parody themselves, just not quite as heavy-handed as you might originally think. That's probably not the best description, but it's the closest thing I can think of right now.
Interesting.
Yes. That's usually the response that most people have to it. I think it's, if anything, it's just a very, very pretty movie to look at. I love the cinematography in that movie, and just it's a very sumptuous looking picture, much like the Hammer Studio horror films were. So if that's your type of bag, then check it out.
That is my bag, indeed.
Oh wow! Well, there you go then.
It's interesting that we come to the topic of comedy, though, because I think it would seem that would maybe go hand in hand with the idea of comfort food, because there is something very endearing about comedy that makes you feel like you're being talked to at a very human level, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with that. There's just I'm not doing a good job of explaining myself right now, but no, I see what you mean. There's just a very inviting sense, to comedy because, like you say, it basically invites you in and says, look, we're two human beings. This is the type of stuff that happens to us. Let's both take a little time to laugh at it together, which I guess is, in so many words, the kind of endearing quality that comedy has to it, because it just kind of looks at us as humans, slightly accentuated, but on the whole, still mostly human.
Yeah, and also the people that you tend to respond to in life. If you're at a party or something, who do people gravitate to? It's the funny person, right?
Yeah, that's why everybody...
Not like a dark, brooding person in the corner.
Yeah.
So if you want to have a good time, I think that's just what you tend to associate with the idea of fun, the idea of friendship, is the person or the movie, in the case of our conversation, that makes you laugh.
Yeah, I think it's...
or that doesn't make you laugh. There's, I don't know, there's something very endearing, I've already used that word, but very endearing to me about, like, bad comedy. I don't know, maybe it's just, like, the idea of, like, dad jokes or something, like something that just doesn't quite hit the mark, but you kind of have to chuckle at how awful it is.
I know what you mean. I could probably think of a few movies from the 90s that kind of fit that bill.
Yeah, like I was watching, I think it's called like Transylvania 6500 or something.
Yeah.
It's like Jeff, what's his name? From
Jeff
Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah, Jeff Goldblum.
And
That's
then
right.
I think Ed Begley Jr.
Yeah, I think so.
It's like there's not a single joke in it that works, but I just kept watching it because it was just so terrible.
No, there is definitely something to use, your oft used word, endearing about it. I think because I would say, and maybe this would be why some people find enjoyment in watching movies like of Ed Wood's ilk, so to speak.
Right.
Um, you, it's not so much that you're finding enjoyment or entertainment out of the finished product. It's almost like you're subconsciously you know, in tune to the effort that was maybe put into, the comedy in the case of, maybe Transylvania 6500 or 1000 or whatever it is. So it's you
Yeah.
get it's
It's
you got
interesting that you bring up Ed Wood, too, because people have a real affection for his films that they wouldn't have for someone like. I mean, I guess it depends on the person, but I would say on the whole, Ed Wood probably gets more love than, say, like Herschel Gordon Lewis.
Oh, Jesus Christ, that is so weird. Read my mind. That was going to be the example I used if you didn't say it.
Yeah. Because his movies, I've only seen a few minutes of, I think it was Blood Feast.
Yeah.
And they're as technically inept as Ed Wood's movies, but they don't have that passion behind them, so you don't get a sense of personality.
Exactly.
When you watch an H.G. Lewis movie.
Yeah, I think that's because, as you, pretty much alluded to just now, that, I don't mean to, make it sound like I have an esteemed or, opinion on the matter, but I would think that would, just from what I've read anyway, when you said that, it made me think of the fact that, H.G. Lewis's background, I believe, before he got into the whole, splatter film gig, was that he was in pornos, or, pseudo pornos at least. So I think coming from that background and going into horror movies.
No pun intended.
Coming straight out of that background and all over the place. It's funny too, because that in turn reminded me of a quote from a movie called Orgasmo that Trey Parker and Matt Stone did back in their early days. And I think it was Matt Stone who said that, kind of as for research, they visited the sets of pornos, and he was surprised at how clinical the whole procedure was. Like, you think it would be like this hot, messy, orgy affair, when really it was very staged and very calculating and just, no passion in it, more or less.
Just people doing their jobs.
Exactly. So I think that might have transferred over into, H.G. Lewis's splatter movies, whereas Ed Wood was making these movies out of a genuine love for the genre. And I think that's why, as you said, people gravitate more towards him, because they realize the fandom and the love that went into the making of his movies.
Yeah, and he left such an imprint of his own personality and his own drive for acceptance in something like Glenn or Glenda, which is so much about, just I want to be accepted and loved for who I am, and it really comes, even if the craftsmanship wasn't there yet, there was still a real, I'll sound smarter when you edit this, right?
Oh yeah, you'll sound way smarter.
Right. But there was, just a real passion behind it.
Right. There was a real drive to, do something. And I think that kind of in a roundabout way gets back to what we said earlier in this podcast about how with the horror comfort food, it's almost as if, kind of going along the lines of nostalgia, like we mentioned, these movies that serve as our comfort food, it's almost as if as we, get older, when we look back on them, it's like they have a little piece of us in them. So I think it's kind of a unique turn of events that we started off saying that, and we ended up talking about how basically, in a sense, Ed Wood created his own comfort food. That's probably a very weird way to put it, but it's just the thought that occurred to me. Yeah.
Yeah, there is a real back and forth between the artist and the viewer. You're
Right.
just sort of putting this third entity in way to sort of discuss things, to sort of put clarity behind it, as opposed to letting someone else talk and then diluting the point with their own interpretation of what you're saying.
Right, exactly, which is something that we discussed earlier as well.
Well, I think with you bringing it around like that, you put a nice little bow on it.
Yeah, I think we kind of inadvertently, for our first podcast, stumbled onto a fairly good conclusion for at least this topic in regards to horror comfort food, about talking about how the artists may even make their own comfort food and leave their own imprint on it. So, basically, to wrap up this first inaugural co-hosting episode, I'll just ask, do you have any final thoughts on the topic in regards to horror comfort food? Maybe some words of wisdom to share with other horror fans out there?
Nope.
Awesome. Keep it short and simple. I like it. But, well, that's fair enough. No problem with that. But I hope
I've never been a fan of conclusions.
Yeah, they have a weird way of just regurgitating everything that was said before without really putting any good final note on themselves. But I guess, I just hope that all of you out there, all of you too, who have been listening to this episode, have had fun doing so. This was kind of a unique topic, I think, for us to start off on, and I hope that we have extrapolated enough for your enjoyment. And, if any of you who are listening to this happen to take to this topic of horror comfort food, don't be afraid to leave some comments in the comment section of this post, letting us know maybe what some of your penultimate horror comfort food examples are. I know Eric and I would both love to hear them. Maybe just me, because Eric's kind of a hermit and he doesn't like talking to other people, but
yeah, I don't care about their opinions.
Yeah, see what I mean? But this is why he's the co-host.
I was barely listening to you this whole time.
I know, see? Good cop, bad cop. We got to have this dynamic going. But, let us know what you think about horror comfort food, and let us know if you have your own examples. And I think that will bring us to a final conclusion. Final conclusion, yeah, that's a great redundant term there.
A concluding conclusion.
A conclusion that concludes. But I think that will, as Eric said before, put a nice bow on this episode of Sinister Spotlight. So
we'll get better at this eventually.
Yeah, well, it'll become hopefully more of second nature to us, where we'll be able to insult each other without much preconceived thought, and for your enjoyment, of course. But, yep. Bright futures ahead, as he said, pausing awkwardly. But yeah, let us know.
Way to bring it all home there, Jose.
Oh yeah, you can always count on me. But yeah, let us know what you thought about the show. And Eric, thanks for stopping by. I am not really looking forward to you being a constant fixture of the show, but I guess I'll have to deal with it at some point in my life.
Yep, you're stuck with me.
All right, well, on that note, I bid you adieu for now, and I bid adieu to all of you listening. Thanks for stopping by.
Thank you.
Hey,